The morning air in downtown Portland carried the energy of change as Maya Chen adjusted the bright orange vest on her golden retriever, Luna. Therapy Dog was emblazoned across the fabric in bold letters. But today, Luna would be so much more than a comfort animal. She would be a guardian of democracy. Around Maya, 11 other handlers prepared their dogs for what had become known in activist circles as a Paws for Peace operation. The volunteer group had formed 6 months earlier after several peaceful protests had turned chaotic, leaving demonstrators traumatized and communities divided. Their mission was simple: use the calming presence of trained therapy dogs to protect protesters and maintain peaceful demonstrations. Remember, our dogs are here to de-escalate, not intimidate, called out David Martinez, the group's coordinator, as he secured the vest on his German Shepherd mix, Scout. We stay calm, they stay calm, everyone stays safe. The protest was scheduled to begin at noon in Pioneer Courthouse Square. The cause was police accountability reform, a topic that had sparked both passionate support and fierce opposition throughout the city. Intelligence from community organizers suggested counter-protesters might arrive, and city officials were nervous about potential clashes. As the first demonstrators began gathering, Maya noticed the immediate effect of the dog's presence. Children who had come with their parents gravitated towards Luna, their anxiety about the large crowd melting away as they petted her golden fur. Elderly activists, some using walkers and canes, seemed to stand a little straighter knowing the dogs were there. "It's amazing how they just know," said Sarah Williams, whose border collie, Ranger, was already positioning himself near a group of college students who seemed overwhelmed by their first protest experience. "They can sense stress and anxiety better than any human." When the march began at 1 p.m., the dogs naturally distributed themselves throughout the crowd of nearly 500 protesters. Each handler wore a radio headset, coordinating movements and sharing information about crowd dynamics. They had trained for months, learning to read both human and canine body language, studying crowd psychology, and practicing de-escalation techniques. 20 minutes into the march, the first test came. A group of counter-protesters had gathered at the intersection of 3rd and Morrison, shouting slogans and holding opposing signs. The tension was immediately palpable as the two groups faced each other across the street. Without any command from Maya, Luna moved closer to an elderly woman who was gripping her "Justice for All" sign with shaking hands. The dog's calm presence seemed to transfer directly to the woman, whose breathing visibly slowed. Nearby, Scout positioned himself between the protesters and the more aggressive counter-protesters, his handler David speaking quietly to both sides. "We're all Americans here," David said calmly, one hand on Scout's head. "We all have the right to be heard." The German Shepherd's steady gaze and peaceful demeanor seemed to cool the heated rhetoric on both sides. As the march continued down the street, the dogs adapted to every challenge. When a protester with PTSD began having a panic attack triggered by the sirens of nearby police cars, Bella, a gentle pit bull mix handled by veteran activist Maria Santos, immediately approached. Without any training specific to this moment, Bella performed what her handler recognized as deep pressure therapy, leaning her full weight against the distressed man until his breathing returned to normal. "She just knows," Maria explained to amazed onlookers. "Dogs can sense changes in our body chemistry before we even realize we're in distress." The most challenging moment came when the march reached City Hall. A line of police in riot gear had formed a barrier, and some protesters began to grow agitated, fearing a confrontation. The atmosphere grew tense, with shouting starting from both protesters and officers. The dog handlers immediately went into action. They spread out along the front line of protesters, their therapy dogs creating a living barrier of calm. Luna sat directly in front of a young officer who looked particularly nervous, her gentle eyes meeting his gaze. Within moments, his posture relaxed slightly. "Even the police respond to them," Maya observed quietly into her radio. "Fear and aggression just seem to dissolve around these dogs." The standoff lasted 30 tense minutes, but no violence erupted. The dogs seemed to create an invisible field of peace, their presence reminding everyone present of their shared humanity. When city officials finally agreed to accept a petition from the protesters, a cheer went up from the crowd. But even in celebration, the dogs maintained their watchful calm. As the afternoon wore on, the dogs continued their work in smaller ways. Ranger helped guide protesters around construction barriers using his natural herding instincts. A golden doodle named Hope provided comfort to children who had grown tired and cranky. Atlas, a massive but gentle Great Dane, simply stood as a calm presence wherever tensions seemed highest. By 4 p.m., the demonstration was winding down. No arrests had been made, no violence had occurred, and both protesters and police seemed relieved. The dogs, tired but alert, remained at their posts until the last demonstrator had safely dispersed. As Maya packed up Luna's water bowl and treats, she reflected on what they had accomplished. "You know what's remarkable?" she said to David as they watched the last of the crowd heading home. "Not a single dog barked today. Not once. They understood this was about peace." David nodded, scratching Scout behind the ears. "They're better at this than we are sometimes. No agenda, no anger, just pure intention to help and protect." The success of the Paws for Peace operation didn't go unnoticed. Within weeks, similar programs began forming in cities across the country. Training programs were developed, best practices were shared, and a new model for protest safety was born. Maya often thought about that day as she continued her work with Luna and other demonstrations throughout the year. Each time they took to the streets, she was reminded that protection didn't always require force or intimidation. Sometimes it just required presence, compassion, and the remarkable ability of dogs to bring out the best in humanity.